morning, and welcome to the Democratic Joint Caucus News Conference this morning. I'm Reynold Nesiba, State Senator from District 15, and serve as Minority Leader. And to my left,
I'm Representative Kadyn Wittman, also from District 15 in Sioux Falls.
And I'm State Representative Erin Healy from District 10, and I serve as the Minority District 10 President Minority Leader.
And Representative Wittman has a vote coming up shortly, so we're going to let her go first and say a few words, and then I think she's going to have to step away.
Yeah, thank you, Senator Nesiba. Like Senator Nesiba mentioned, I have a very important vote happening in the Agricultural Committee around our grant board, so I need to jet back up to that committee hearing. But I did want to just make a few comments and say a few words about something that transpired earlier this week. So on Monday of this week, just a few days ago, although it feels like a million years sometimes, there was a really disappointing outcome to one of my bills that was heard in the House floor. My bill would have provided a civil avenue for individuals that are the victims of stealthing, which is non-consensual condom removal. And in layman's terms, it's when one partner removes a condom during an intimate encounter without the knowledge or consent of the other individual. The bill had a very robust committee hearing the week prior. We heard from a victim of this act who 4 years ago, as a result of this, had an unintended pregnancy, but because this act is not explicitly outlined in South Dakota's codified law, she did not feel that she had any avenues for recourse or justice against her perpetrator. So she's been a single mother for 3.5 years. The bill passed out of committee 8-4. It was scheduled to be heard on the floor on Monday afternoon of this week. I presented the bill, I gave my opening testimony, and then one of my Republican colleagues used a very rarely used rule in our rule book that immediately ended discussion, eliminated the chance for any representatives to ask questions or request clarification on language, and due to that, this bill failed along party lines 7-63. And it wasn't the fact that the bill died that really bummed me out, although that was definitely a part of it. I think the most disturbing part to me was that the victim who testified in committee was listening online while we were hearing this bill on the House floor Monday afternoon. And she was texting me and asking why nobody was asking any questions and why there was no discussion around this bill. And I wish that every single person in the House of Representatives had to receive those same texts and had to explain to this victim why there was no conversation around this bill that she had worked so hard on. And it was just a very, very disappointing day for me. I believe that the fact that we did not have a discussion around this bill was an insult to victims of this act, victims of sexual assault in our state, victim advocates. All of the individuals that testified in support of this bill during the committee hearing were robbed of the chance to have their voices heard in the House floor on Monday afternoon. With that being said, we've also had a couple of wins this week. I had a win yesterday in appropriations. My bill that would waive the fee for state IDs for unhoused individuals in South Dakota passed unanimously. It will be heard on the House floor early next week. I'm hopeful that we are also able to pass it through the House there. And I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to share, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And again, I hope that other legislators remember that there's always a broader audience than just the House chamber, the Senate chamber, and how we treat each other matters a lot. And you deserve to be treated better than that, Representative. Thank you. Erin Healy.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment on that as well. You can tell we've got the Capitol Cup going around, so a little hard to say. But that was an incredibly unfortunate incident that occurred. It was really difficult to work the rest of the week, and there was a debate on the House floor on whether hunters should be able to legally wear pink fluorescent jackets. And while I don't want to speak to the merits of that bill because I thought it was a good bill, I voted yes. It's really disappointing to hear my colleagues their mothers and their daughters and wives when we are talking about sexual abuse and completely disregarding that issue on the House floor. And that just made me so incredibly disappointed. And I thought it was just wildly inappropriate for our Republican colleagues to do that. We also have received apologies for that incident. But there's no accountability that's been held. And I'll go a step further and say that even in the committee hearing, there was a member of the Republican Party who was laughing at the information that was shared, and there's been no accountability held for that either. I think sexual abuse is a matter that needs to be taken seriously. I think it's incredibly unfortunate that when we as Democrats talk about issues that are trying to keep women safe, that they are completely disregarded. But when our Republican colleagues talk about issues that keep women safe, they all hop into line and vote yes. And I think there needs to be accountability held for their actions and for their bad behavior. Other than that, you can comment on that.
Yeah, let me just pick up on that. I think that's going to be one of our themes for today. So again, Democrats in the state Senate have been doing what we always do, standing with workers. Sometimes they're not our bills, but I thought that Dave Johnson had a great bill this week that would have given a presumption of cancer being caused by work for our firefighters across the state of South Dakota, and I stood and spoke with him to try and get that passed, but Republicans put that bill down, which was unfortunate. Again, we're standing up for education. I was sad to see that the Republicans again pulled a bill yesterday that would have allowed for being able to provide food for kids at school. But this has also been a week where we've been, yesterday in particular was the day that we were talking about abortion laws. So yesterday in Health and Human Affairs, I brought a bill forward to have a conversation and to make a point. My bill was it was 2 pages of new text talking about abortion and creating an individual right to abortion. And then it pointed out that over the last 50 years, there's 45 pages of code, 114 sections that would have to be deleted, or you could view these as infringements on women's right to bodily autonomy. We heard from Dr. Amy Healy in Sioux Falls, speaking only for herself, and she made it really clear that she's helped hundreds of babies come into the world, but she's also been there at times when women have experienced a stillbirth or had to make a decision about terminating a pregnancy because of their own life and health. And right now, South Dakota abortion laws are unworkable. We put a doctor like Dr. Amy Kelly in a position where her best decisions, her moral North Star is to take care of her patient, but she doesn't know how much does a woman have to bleed, how sick does a woman have to be before she can induce an abortion to save that woman's life or health. And we have to fix this. And the supermajority Republicans have shown no interest in this whatsoever. In fact, we passed a resolution yesterday that I think is completely out of line, that our Constitution in South Dakota allows the people of South Dakota to put a measure on the ballot, and they passed a resolution opposed to that. And that's just wrong. And again, after session yesterday, I just shared and pulled up the statute that it's illegal for the state of South Dakota or anybody in office to be using any state resources to either oppose or to support a particular ballot measure or any particular election. And I just think that the legislature should stay in its own lane and should not be taking a stand on that. But if the women of South Dakota, the families of South Dakota are going to address this, I think it's going to have to either be addressed through the ballot measure that's on the ballot in November, or it needs to become an issue for the legislative races this fall. I do want to highlight a couple of other things that are caucus and successes we've had. Senator Liz Larson had brought this bill on artificial intelligence that would require a disclosure 90 days before an election, and made some amendments to that to please you all here in the press to make sure that you wouldn't be held liable, but simply making it clear that this would be a penalty for those who create those and have to put a disclosure on it 90 days ahead of time. That did pass off the Senate floor and is coming over to the House. Democrats stood together also with a deeply problematic lithium mining bill, and what's clear that we stand with environmental groups about protecting the Black Hills. We're concerned about being able to conserve that, and our fear was this poorly written piece of tax legislation was going to do more to legitimate that process and generate almost no revenue. And so that was why we stood against that, and that measure did fail. And I hope we come back with something better next year when we do that. And I'm grateful to Red John Foster, who's been really working on appropriations, and again working with Linda Duva, helping Democrats figure out our priorities there and what's possible now that we're past the revenue setting process that went forward this week. So with that, I would open it up to questions.
I'll add one more thing.
Go ahead.
Speaking of Linda Duva,
Yeah.
we had a win.
Yes.
She passed summer EBT bills, so children now will be able to be, low-income children will be able to be fed during the summer. So that was a huge win for us.
And again, it just continues to fit into what Democrats do. We're standing up for workers, we're standing up for education, and we're standing up for women every day in the House and in the Senate. So we'll open it up for questions. Austin Goss.
SDBA, Coast Scout. With the stealthy bill, is maybe the more, it seems like it's a fair assessment to say that Republicans have pretty well made up their mind on that bill. Is the frustration more with the fact that it failed, or the fact that there wasn't a more robust or a robust debate at all on the bill?
Yeah, and Representative Kadyn Wittman did comment on that prior to you. No worries. It was more about the procedures and how that debate went down. What was really unfortunate was it was an 8-4 vote out of committee. Usually when you have that great of a vote coming out of committee, you're going to see some good debate on the House floor, and you're going to see a decent amount of people voting yes. What we've been hearing from our Republican colleagues is it's not necessary in state statute because it should already be covered. But I would argue that this victim who showed up, and I wasn't there for it, but from what I'm hearing, this victim that showed up for the committee hearing was not able to pursue any kind of lawsuit based off of current statutes. And we pass bills every day where we continue to put into law things we don't need to put into law. We saw this week with the obscenities bill that Chris Carr brought, adding in state statute that it would be, I believe, a class 2 misdemeanor to have live obscene content on our college campuses. But that's already a rule that we see with the Board of Regents. I would argue that the anti-Semitism bill that we had, the bill creating more protections for them, we already have those protections in place, and Republicans voted yes for that. So it's just an example of the hypocrisy that we are continuing to see here in the state capitol.
I would just add that on that bill that there's a conversation and people using that word stealthing in contemporary society today and making it really clear that this is illegal would be a protection for women, and that's why it was necessary, and it deserved a full, robust debate on the House floor, but instead the process was short-circuited, and it was, I can't read the intent, but to me as an outsider it looks like it was done to disrespect and to insult Representative Wittman, and that's not okay.
You said you got an apology from the House Republicans on that. Who was the apology from? Can you kind of elaborate on that?
There have been a number of Republicans reaching out to Representative Wittman to apologize for what happened, and that wasn't the intent of what they wanted to happen. They wanted to have a debate. Speaker Bartles was great in telling his caucus to make sure that things stay professional and that we stay on the topic. So there is absolutely no blame there. What I think is really disappointing is there's been no accountability held for the behavior that we have seen coming out of that bill.
For you, what would accountability look like?
That's a really good question because I do know that that procedure was something that any House member can motion for. But I believe that Representative Wittman, as well as those victims, deserve an apology for how terribly they were treated.
Sorry to keep harping on this. I guess, what kind of surprised me when the question was called on that was just, I don't think I heard but maybe one no or two. I mean, is it fair to say you guys were not expecting that?
No one was expecting that, and if you go back and watch the video, you will see surprised faces. I went back and watched it last night, and everyone was shocked. And as we are talking to some of our Republican colleagues, they were not expecting that. Some of them didn't even know. They haven't been around for a whole term yet, and didn't even realize that that was a procedure move that we could make. I think a lot of people were just shocked and did not know how to reply to that. And on the spot, how to vote when you see a procedure like that. And yes, we've seen it used, but we usually see that used after debate has been completely finalized and there's nothing else to say.
Our tradition on the Senate side would be that that's something that one of the leaders is allowed to bring, that you wouldn't have a member doing it, you would only do it after the debate. It is seen as an insult to cross debate like that. So.
Yeah, I hope that
the person who did that should write an
apology to Representative Wittman. Other questions? What else is?
What else is on your mind? Did you want to ask about Senate Bill 13, about Attorney General, Secretary of State, and elections going forward, and how that went with Senate State Affairs yesterday? You thought that bill was dead, but we are taking a third run at that this legislative session.
Oh, yeah, I'll ask. I mean, you spoke last week, Representative Healy, a little bit about this, sort of having this bill come back and back and back. You, of course, yesterday supported that bill. I mean, I guess just generally, do you think this is the right move? I mean, when you kind of, if the shoe was on the other foot, per se, would you be a little frustrated with this?
Yeah, well, I still think this is an idea that I supported a year ago, and again, on the Senate side, our amendment that the Democrats wanted, which is that if a party, and it would apply not just to Democrats, but to the Libertarians or Constitutional Party, that if they didn't have somebody who had taken out petitions for Attorney General, Secretary of State, that they would still be able to use a convention to be able
to introduce a candidate. And
I just think that the convention system is fundamentally broken. I thought that Schoenbeck made a good argument yesterday that, a few years ago when we had just finished the conviction of Jason Ramsberg, and he had somebody in his office who perhaps had engaged in criminal misconduct, that at the convention they nearly nominated that person as the Attorney General candidate rather than Marty Jackley. The Attorney General and the Secretary of State is such an important position that it shouldn't be decided by 100 people at a convention. These are folks that should be taking out petitions and running statewide. It's simply a better protection, and we'll have better candidates from both parties as a result of this process. So I hope that the Senate bill passes. And again, I think Democrats are united, actually, as long as this amendment is on there. We think that this is a good thing going forward. It's the Republicans that can't get this because there's some mega Republicans that think that have a tiny group of fervent folks that want to run things from the convention, and they're afraid. They would rather have 100 people than 105,000 people voting in a primary making those decisions, and they're feeling their power being taken away from them, and they're not letting that power go quietly.
Is that, I mean, you talked about that amendment and how Democrats are essentially, I mean, from your perspective, a no-go if that amendment's not on there. Last week, the House Democrats, of course, voted for that bill without the amendment. Is that the case in the House now, or?
That's not true. The amendment was put on in the House, and then Democrats supported the bill, but Republicans who had been favoring the bill changed to no votes, and that's why it failed in the House.
Right, but what I'm trying to say is 1198, previous bill, was voted, I mean, I believe all Democrats without the convention amendment didn't vote for it. You just said that Democrats probably wouldn't support it if that amendment isn't on there. Is that, do you see what I'm saying? Like, in the House, you guys voted for it without that amendment. Would you guys vote for it without that amendment now?
No, if that amendment isn't on there, I wouldn't support the, it's much better, but you're right, and I see the good question that you're asking me. Yeah, at the moment, they need our votes, and we need to be protected in that, and so we are happy to work with moderate Republicans at getting this done and fixed. And so Senate Bill 13 came out unanimously out of State Affairs yesterday, and is that on the Senate floor today? I don't think there was an amendment, so it'll be on the calendar on Tuesday, right?
I guess I would have that too at this point, they would need that that amendment in the bill in order for Democrats to vote on it, especially like in this week and not feeling like Republicans have wanted to work with Democrats.
You know, in arguments about the previous two bills to fix the convention process, a lot of the opponents said this is going to bring in big money to our AG and our SOS races. Like, how do you guys respond to that? Like, you guys run in primaries, you already get donations. Why would people be afraid about that?
Yeah, I don't know why they're afraid about that. And again, there's just different
Power and influence.
within the convention need to continue to
Educate South Dakotans in this.
grand experiment we're in self-government. And so I would prefer the money was raised in state rather than out of state. But yeah, there should be a primary process, and primaries are great for parties, and primaries help educate the public. So yeah, there'll be more spending, and it would be a better process. I think one of the worst things we can do in representative democracy is simply have people go out, gather 50 signatures, get on the ballot, and become a senator or representative, and it happens way too often in the state of South Dakota.
I also want to add, like, the amendment that we're adding on doesn't weaken that process, because in the general election, it's important to have different parties running on their platforms, because that's how democracy works best, is by having those ideas and those opinions available to the public.
I hate to ask a leading question. I guess I've just been here for 4 years now, and I'm thinking about the stealthing conversation we just had. Are you guys at all worried that folks come back next year and just pass another law and take that amendment out? I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe I've just seen the writing on the wall too much. I've seen this movie a lot. I feel like.
Yeah, and when I first got here 8 years ago, or after being here for a year and seeing that happen, I've decided it's now not a bug, but it's actually a feature of the system, is that Democrats bring up, I think back to the Billy Sutton election. Billy Sutton ran on, what we really need to do is we need to have a needs-based scholarship, and a few years later we get the Freedom Scholarship. He said we should have an international trade office. Now we finally have an international trade office. And so Democratic priorities oftentimes do become law, because the other side is spending so much time on other things. So, you know, and I don't, there's other bills that are still passing through that were originally Democratic ideas that I don't want to highlight because I really want them to pass. And so I'm just going to stay quiet about them because there are some of those going on right now. And so I'm glad that Democrats, we're here to govern and to make South Dakota a better place. And we finally realized, or at least I realized, that it's more important to have the good legislation passed rather than get credit for it. So, I mean, my favorite example was my driver's license applications and the written exam in Spanish, right? I had to bring it up twice, and it failed. I finally asked B.J. Smith and Jess Olson to carry the bill so I could finally get it passed. So, and that's sometimes what we have to do.
What are you guys looking out for next week?
It's crossover week.
It's true.
So everything.
Yeah. So getting things out, but also we're spending more time after session and between meetings having conversations about the appropriations as well. So I'm grateful to have Senator Foster and Representative Duba on that. I'm thankful for Senator Brightling, who's been really open and pulls up at sharing it, and that's having Senator Brightling he's really worked with the LRC to make sure that we're all using the same numbers when so whether it's House Republicans, Senate Republicans, or Democrats collectively, that we're all looking at the same Excel spreadsheet and figuring out what our priorities are, but at least we're not disagreeing about what the top and bottom numbers need to be. And so that's become a better process in the 8 years I've been here.
Do you think a tuition freeze is on its way after the revenue?
I hope so, because after the revenue setting, we do have a little bit more in terms of one-time money and ongoing funding. So I'm hoping that does. I hope we're able to do that. I've heard some conversation even about trying to do a little more than 4% for teachers. So we'll see if we can match that. Again, my back of the envelope calculation was that we needed to do 6.5 simply to get us back to where we were in 2017, just to keep up with inflation.
Good. Good. You look like you're miserable right now.
I'm sorry.
I'm ready for the weekend.
Right, this is the first Friday of the week, and so I sure hope you feel better over the weekend, and I'm glad I get to go back to my